Megan. Hello.
Hi,
Hey,
Hey. Can you hear us all right?
I can. Can you
Awesome.
guys hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
very great.
Cool. Yeah, I'm in my 9-year-old daughter's room with a dog, so we'll see.
That dog was perfectly timed. It
Yeah.
jumped up as soon as you said with a dog.
He did. He did. He got excited. Nothing's exciting going to happen for him though. So, like him. Um, yeah. Thanks for doing this, you guys. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
so
welcome. Thank you.
Were you
yeah,
surprised when you got an interview request to do something about Camp Wilder?
totally. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about it's not like it's a secret. It's just it's so long ago, and like I felt a little bit like I was in like witness protection and you guys like found me and I was like, whoa, okay. And then I was talking to my husband, and I was like, actually, I really love that show. It'd be super fun to talk about it because when else would I get to talk about it? So I'm happy. It's cool. How did you guys get the idea for the podcast? Like
So
it's very specific, which I'm into.
yeah, so I was just I've always wanted to do this. I told Steve, I was like, I've always wanted to do a podcast where I watched TGIF as it aired, like perfectly, So whatever shows came on that week, watch those shows and then talk about them. And we were coming back from, I think there's a little bit of discrepancy on where we were, how, like when this actually gelled together. But I was like, let's do this. And he's like, okay. And then we
I
looked at
think
the
the whole
date.
that's the whole thing. Like
We looked at the date and it was the 30th anniversary of TGIF about to start. So we're like, well, if we're going to do it, this is the time to do it. So we've just been watching 30 years later, all of the shows that have come on TGIF as they would have aired 30 years ago. So it just happened to work out. It was perfect.
Yeah, yeah. And did you watch TGIF like
Oh
legit?
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
of course, of course.
You did. Okay.
Did
All
you
right.
watch TGIF
Yeah, yeah, I did. Yeah,
like
yeah,
before you were on it? I mean, did you? It was a huge thing going on. Did you watch it
yeah.
yourself? Did you like partake in the phenomenon?
I mean, sort, because
Oh,
I was aware of it because at that time, like the child actor community was like tiny.
mhm.
So you'd go out on audition and you'd see a lot of the people who were on TGIF. And it was funny. I was looking over at your list of podcasts and I saw that you guys had Angela Watson, and I was like, we were in an acting class together. Another dude from Step by Step was in that acting class, and so it was like a strange little community that we all kind of
Right,
knew. I mean, that's no news. I mean, you guys have seen like Kid 90. I mean, that's like how it was. So
right. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So more than watching the shows, we kind of knew who each other were. We were always like bumping up against one another.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So
So
were you
Mhm.
excited when the call came and it was time to be a part of TGIF?
um, they didn't. So the show, I had done a pilot that season, and the pilot was produced by the same creator as Camp Wilder,
Mhm.
and his name is Matthew Carlson, and he went on to do like Malcolm in the Middle, and he's just like a gem of a human. Like he was just like a really good dude, and like wrote stuff about kids that was actually kind of smart and about the secret life of kids. Like he was like a
mhm.
cool guy. So he had written this pilot and it was the first pilot I'd ever done, and it didn't get picked up. But he had another pilot, which was Camp Wilder, and Camp Wilder at the time didn't have a character my age, but
Mhm.
the network was like, you know what, we're going to pick this show up, but we're going to add a character. And Matthew was like, you know what, I think I'm just going to move Meghann over. And I had no idea that it was going to be, slated for TGIF at the time. I was just like, ooh, I get to
Good
be
job.
on the show. Like, that's cool. So I don't think we actually found out that it was going to be in the lineup after dinosaurs, until like probably until like the late fall. I think that's when they announced the
Okay.
lineup. Yeah. I don't think they announced the lineups until back then. They didn't announce them until like late summer.
So
So
literally last minute you found out.
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the pilot, was that called Camp Bicknell? Is that a different thing, or like when did the change happen? They're like, all right, we're gonna take out two of our main characters, bring these other two in named Jerry O'Connell and Mary
Mary Page
Page
Keller.
Keller, and then we'll keep the rest of the kids, but then we're gonna change the name too. Is that kind of how it happened?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
totally what happened. Yeah. Yeah. Camp Bicknell, I don't know if Matthew lived in Venice Beach, but Bicknell is a name of a place like
Mm.
in Venice. It's a name of a street, and it's those like craftsman bungalow style,
Yeah.
super, yeah, like
Yeah.
super LA, Southern California, and that's he based it off of that street, and so like all the exteriors are from that street. And then I don't know, I think the network was like, the name Bicknell's weird, dude, like you gotta change it. And I think he was like, all right, so then they just changed it to the name of the family, which is not the name of a street that we lived on. But yeah, that's how it worked. I was trying to remember if Jerry had been added. I was walking my dog this morning, I was like, did Jerry also come on the show? And he did. Yeah, he was a late ad too. Thank you
Like
for
him and Tina, and I think yeah, Mary Page were all kind of new from onto the actual broadcast in the pilot, right? Does that sound
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes, that's right. But I don't remember if maybe you guys know if they were parts that they replaced or if they were just added. I know my character
It
was
looks
just
like
like,
parts replaced to me is what I was kind of picking up. Like
Yeah.
there were other actors playing their roles in the pilot.
Yeah, because well, I don't think there was a Sophie. I think it was just Brody. Brody and Ricky were other actors, actresses, and then I think there was another younger child, but it was Lucy, not Sophie. But
yes, yes, that's right. Did you guys get your hands on the actual pilot? I'm
no,
so
We don't have the
I
pilot, no.
we don't, but we have IMDb, and it's really helpful. So that's where we're pulling it from. But we got the rest of the show, and it's been fun. It's been really fun to go back and watch. So
We were a little worried about it at the beginning. I'm not gonna lie. Like the first couple episodes, we are like, "Are we gonna like this show?" I'm not sure. It's a whole like we had just finished watching all of Baby Talk with Mary Page Keller, and we're like, "Is this just gonna be another like Mary Page Keller show?" We were worried that it was just gonna be just about her. But then I feel like episode 3, episode 4, they really started going like, "All right, we're gonna talk about this kid this episode, and like have a story with this kid this episode." And then that's when we felt like it got pretty good. Like we were into it at that point.
yeah,
yeah, I feel I've listened to a couple of your recaps, and it's interesting because you guys totally pick up on it. I mean, I think, and I want to know if you guys think the same thing. I feel like tonally they were picking up on this like new culture shift of like kids moving into the grunge thing. Like there was definitely, it definitely felt a little bit like edgier than I feel like Step by Step or
Yeah.
anything like, and I was like, oh, they were really trying. Like they were really trying to like do something other than like a pat sitcom. I don't know. Maybe that's why I got canceled. I don't know.
Well, so it's funny that you say that because we've seen a lot of what ABC used to do during the summer for TGIF was show the pilots that they filmed that didn't get picked up, and a lot of them are the same kind of premise of like young adult, like older brother, older sibling, older cousin who has to now take care of an entire family. And it just doesn't work because the older sibling, older person is kind of just overbearing. I don't know. It's not like what I think Camp Wilder went into, which is kind of the kids all working together to have this, family unit, as opposed to there being just constant conflict between everybody. And that's what I love about Camp Wilder is it's about the kids making it a family as opposed to Mary Page Keller just being a mom again. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really true. There's like a sweetness about it that I think that comes through, for sure. And I also think that just like Mary Page Keller probably was bait and switched a bit. I feel like she probably signed on thinking it was going to be her show, kind of like Courtney Cox Friend style, and then it just sort of like shifted to an ensemble thing, which makes sense because like they hired such good actors. Like they got so lucky. Like
they didn't even know how lucky they got. Like it's the kind of thing where they bought a lottery ticket that if you look 10 years like into the future, they had no idea kind of who they had signed up for that show. So
I know. It's I think it's kind of remarkable actually. I mean, Matthew, that doesn't surprise me because I think he's a gem and I think he's got a good eye for talent, but
even then you all were getting nominated for acting awards as children and for those young artist awards and whatnot. So
I mean,
does that not count? I don't know. It's an award. It's not, Hillary Swank and $1 Million Baby, but it's
those things are like, I mean, honestly, like I think I was more excited about getting like, the participation trophy for like like it was
fair enough. You didn't get to go to some great award shows, some big party and hang out with everybody.
Yeah, so there's this like super rundown crazy like motorhome motel in the valley called the Sportsman's Lodge. And the Sportsman's Lodge has like fountains that are so electric blue because they've pumped them full of whatever to kill all the algae. Like they're just so gross. And you go and and they've rented out this like musty banquet room and they just pack it full of all of these like, sad kid actors and their parents. And then and then you go up and you like accept it. And then, you go into the bathroom and there's like Moesha and you're like, hey, I mean, it's not glamorous. It feels very much like, a machine. It feels like everybody's just trying to like, get exposure because
Fair
back
enough.
then it was like pre-internet, you would just anything to get into Teen Beat was really like what you were doing.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, that was the Youth and Film Awards, the YIFAs.
That's a good acronym, the YIFAs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what that looked like. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like Jerry, I was trying to think like where Jerry was at that point because I think he was at such an interesting point in his career because he was like the most seasoned of everybody. I mean, he was, beloved for
Stand by Me.
um and I think he had dropped out of NYU to come do the show. I
Wow.
think yeah, he was in college and he was, he'd like transformed himself. He was like on the fencing team. Like he was just like kind of a specimen. And I think he was really good. He was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to come back and I'm not going to be in this, this hole of like this pigeonhole of like I'm the kind of the doughy kid from Stand By Me. I'm going to be something different. And so for him, I think the stakes were kind of high, but he had this like career. So I think he was probably the most like experienced and the least green of all of us, I think.
Do you remember
So
what it was like?
before is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Do you remember what it was like being like a young teenager and finding out, hey, I just signed on to a sitcom. Like I'm gonna be on TV every week. Like, do you remember that feeling? Like what it was like?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, middle school sucks. So, I like didn't have to go to middle school. So, um, that was great. And, for me personally, like I wasn't in the position where my family had like uprooted us from someplace else and moved here, and it
Yeah.
was all riding on whether or not I worked. Um, my dad was an actor, and I was like, this looks really fun. Like, he'd pick me up after school, and like I'd have to go with him on auditions, and I'd sit there, and I was like, this is kind of cool. I want to try this, and so he did. And then once I kind of got the bug of it, I think yeah, I wanted to work. So landing at that point, like landing like a sitcom, because it was sort of the golden age of
Yeah.
sitcoms, was a big deal, even though ours was like, I mean, I don't even think we ever broke into the 80, like that, like out of the 90s of like the rankings, no one watched it, but it was super exciting. You get to like, you have like a job, you have like a place to be, and you only have to go to school like I don't know, 20 minutes a day. Like it was great. So it was super fun. Yeah, and that, yeah, I mean being that age too, like you're ready to not be around your parents all the time. So I had all of these like, cool pseudo older siblings that were I was hanging out with. Super fun.
So you would so that wasn't your only TGIF, right? Because you also were on Step by Step. So, or not Step by Step. I'm sorry, Boy Meets World. You're on an episode of Boy Meets World, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, it
Do
was.
you remember that at all?
I do remember that. Yeah. Um, that's the one that people most often recognize me from because I think people love that show. Like
Oh yeah, sure.
people are really into that show. That I had auditioned for, so many girl parts on that show over the years. And I was in college at that point, and I came back, and NYU was like, I was at NYU, and they were like, you can't audition during the year. And I was like, well, this place is so expensive. Like, how am I going to pay for anything? So I called my agent. I was like, I gotta get a job. And he was like, all right, just come back and audition for this Boy Meets World part. I was like, okay. So I went in and I auditioned for it. And of course it was for like this really, like, it's just for this part that was so annoying. It was like a young actor part. Like she's like in acting school
Mhm.
and she's obnoxious. And I was like, I know how to play this part because I'm in acting school. And it was just like, yeah, yeah. So that part, and then I think I had to make out with like two out of the three main guys on the show, which I was like, okay, let's do that too. But they were different. I mean, they were, it was Matthew Lawrence and it was Ryder Strong, and I mean, you guys know the names better than I do. And then of course Ben Savage,
Mhm.
and all of them, like, in the status of kid actors, like they were very like established,
They're
like
cover of Teen Beat at that point.
At
and
that
they,
point, yeah.
oh yeah, they were,
Yeah.
yes, they were a cover story for sure. So they were all like, so I don't know, they were so seasoned. They were just like little corporations, like they know exactly how to function, you know.
Yeah.
But that show was, I mean, they were fun. They were really nice. They were really, Topanga was so nice. I can't remember her name, but she was such a sweet person.
Was that on the same lot as Camp Wilder?
No, that one was on, I think they shot that on Disney,
Oh, okay.
which is out in Burbank.
Mhm.
And our show was shot at this, like, I don't even know if it exists anymore. It's called Prospect Studios. It's like a tiny little lot out in the middle of, I think, Silver Lake. And I think the only other show that shot there was America's Funniest Home Videos with Bob Saget.
Nice.
Yeah, he'd pull up in his limo Friday nights and film. Yeah.
So with Camp Wilder, it ended up being 19 episodes. Like, how did they order the show? Like, was it like 6 episodes that you did at the beginning, and then they were like, "All right, we want some more," or did you guys film a whole bunch all at once, or do you remember the ordering process and like when you found out there was going to be more episodes?
Yeah. They usually order, back then they would order 13. That was
Mhm.
usually like standard, which would have been one half of a 26 episode season. Maybe less because they would take off a couple weeks for the holidays. So maybe it was like a 24 season. I can't quite remember. So I don't remember when they call it the back half. I think it was over Christmas, and I think they only picked us up for like six or seven, and which is never a good sign.
Mhm.
And it was at that point, you guys, I don't know if you've gotten to it yet, but they did start to shift. I think they were just trying to figure out who they could get to watch the show, and they started actually doing more episodes about the kid. That's when you really see them doing more episodes about the kids. Like I think the last 6 episodes, like I'm in it a lot more, because I think they were like, oh, 12-year-old, 13-year-old girls are home on a Friday night. Like, you know, teenagers are really not. So yeah. So I think that's when I think I think so. I think January was when we got the second half and we started doing those episodes.
Yeah,
We filmed March.
I think the 9:30 slot's tough on TGIF because I mean I remember watching it as a kid. Like my bedtime, like I got to watch the 9 o'clock, and then like I usually had to go to bed for the 9:30 show. Like I
Right.
didn't get to stay up for that, so I missed a lot. I don't remember Camp Wilder at all. I don't know how old I was. I think I'm like a few years younger than you are, maybe like 3 years or something like that. But I didn't watch a lot of Perfect Strangers. That was 9 o'clock, right?
Well, no, so you had the first one was Just the 10 of Us. And I mean, I didn't watch a lot of Just the 10 of Us. And that was another show that really took a lot of time to find its footing because I think, like you said, they were trying to figure out what that audience was at that time on a Friday night. So, like Just the 10 of Us, and then you had Going Places, Baby Talk, all shows that really struggled to figure out how to connect. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a young person, I wasn't really thinking about it like that,
sure.
critically, but I think I'd be very curious to know like what the demographics were, like who was, because also Dinosaurs is, I mean,
It's such a
it's
tricky show.
great, but it's such a tricky show. Like you're either really into it or you're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Or you're like me back then, and you just are only there for the baby, and that's it. Like, let me see the baby hit the dad on the head with a frying pan. I'm good.
Yeah. It's such a different show now than it was 30 years ago because we're adults, and that's the kind of weirdness that was leading into you guys at 9:30. So
Right, exactly. So you wait, so dinosaurs would put you to bed. You'd like watch dinosaurs and you'd be like, I'm good. And you'd go to sleep. That was kind of your, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if dinosaurs was like more of a male audience that, and I think Camp Wilder probably skewed more female and ever, so it was a hard lead in.
I mean, they've focused. I think the focus right now, when the kid, your character has had a couple shows, but mostly Brody seems to be the focus of kind of this front half when it comes to the kids, which makes sense. He's the oldest, right? And that way you get a little bit more Dorfman, which is just gold every time he comes on screen. But yeah, so I guess you're saying the second half though, what we have to look forward to is more of kind of, I guess, you and is there much with Sophie at that point, or
they never really they didn't go there that much.
Yeah.
Probably because anybody
She's young.
watching was like, why do I don't want to watch about a 7-year-old.
Right.
But which is a shame because I mean, talk about somebody who's like super talented. Even at that age, she was so good. But yeah, they started shifting, and the one that really stands out, they would actually connect my character to the older kids, which is what you were saying earlier, which is like it really became about everybody coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like some episode where it's like I get hooked on diet pills, and it becomes this like whole, just conversation in the way that TGIF could have a conversation about body image and standards about what was considered acceptable for girls and women. And it's like Beth and Margaret and Mary Page and I all like in a bathroom next to a scale, like I think that's how the episode ends.
Right.
So they were still using the other characters, and it was still very much about those relationships, but I think that they were like, well, I think we're going to just throw anything at the wall. Let's see if storylines about Melissa work.
Yeah. I mean, they touch on a lot of those serious, like story points that like you said, TGIF is kind of known for, when you've got the homeless episode with AJ Langer as the guest star. And then kind of the episode that deals a lot with Melissa and what is assumed to be like her period and how that kind of conversation goes. Obviously it turned out to be different, but like, yeah, they touch on a lot of those topics that were, I don't know, harder to talk about, I guess, back then. So.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, like whose agenda that was. And I don't know how much pushback there was for the network, or if there were people who were like, no, we need to start having these conversations if we're going to stay relevant. I don't know how that, unfolded, because I was 13 and like just eating red vines at the craft service table. Like I didn't really know like what was happening that way, but I did feel it. Like it didn't feel like step by step, which was so, like really comfortable. Like they just really stayed in a certain comfort zone to their benefit.
For the most part, yeah.
Were hugely successful, whereas
absolutely.
They were like, all right, I'm gonna yank this thing off the air.
Shame.
When you mentioned earlier about ordering like just 6 episodes for the back half, was everyone kind of preparing like that was the end of it, or like did people see it coming at that point?
Yeah, I mean, we knew the ratings were so poor. That everyone pretty much knew. And I think the big metric, I mean, the metric that we looked at least that I absorbed as a 13-year-old, was the drop off. So like if Dinosaurs was at like a 60 in the ratings, because there were only like, a certain number of shows. And so you could actually track how many people were watching them and then put them in a list, come out in the LA Times like each week. And Dinosaurs would be like at a certain number, and then we would have dropped like way lower, which meant that people were just turning it off or going to sleep.
I feel like if you guys were around during DVR, it would have been completely different. Like the people that would be going to bed at 9:30 would be also the people that would record it and watch it the next morning when they woke up.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, I could see me doing that for sure.
Have you gone back and watched it as an adult recently, or
No, 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 no.
yeah,
No.
it's a great. I mean, I don't know what you remember. Did you watch it when when it came on when you were on it when you were a kid?
Um, well, I remember, I listened and watched to Angela, her interview because it was just like such a bizarre thing to be like, oh my God, I totally know her. And I have not thought about her in 30 years. And I was like, I want to hear like what's going on with her. And so when she was talking about how the schedule work that TGIF was on when we were filming.
Right.
So we would sometimes, if your episode, like if I was light in an episode and I didn't have a lot to do, you'd run up in between scenes up into your dressing room, which was in our studio, was like on the second or third floor. And so you run upstairs and like you could watch a little bit of your show while you were still filming. And then you'd have to like run back downstairs and like,
Hmm.
for your cue. And then, so.
So you've never seen it?
Uh, I've seen some of them. I've seen some of them. I mean,
It's a really good show. And like to Steve's point, like it is the kind of show I think that if people weren't 12 and had to go to sleep would have probably been really excited to watch, or if they had the ability to watch it the next day, would have taken that opportunity. But it's a good show.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to Matthew Carlson's credit, like he's a good writer.
Yeah, yeah.
Was it
Let's see.
was it hard on you as like a young teenager when you finally found out that it wasn't going to be picked up, or like you said with the 6 episodes being ordered, like did you have time to prepare for that moment when they officially made that announcement?
Yeah, it was sad. I was really sad. Um, I was thinking about it and I was like, why was that show the one that like I have like the most tender spot for? Because I was on a bunch of other shows that were also canceled after a year. But that one, I think it was my first show. It was
Yeah.
my first series. So everything was like new and super fun. And nobody else in the cast was my age. And so I think because of that, they all kind of took me under their wing, and it was very sweet. Like they were all like, one lunch I'd spend in Hillary's dressing room and she would talk to me about like being a vegetarian, and she had like a parrot that she brought with her every day to the set. Parrots. And then I'd hang out with Margaret and Margaret would talk to me about like the patriarchy and I'd be like, yeah, right. And then I'd go and hang out with Jerry and Jerry'd be like, you need to listen to this music. And he gave me like my first CD I ever had. He gave me Arrested Development, and I was like, "This is dope." And then Jay was always a reflection, I think, of like how brutal the industry was because he'd been kicking around for a while. So he would sometimes hang out with me, but he was more like he was hustling, like he was working really hard
Yeah.
at that point. And Mary Page, like she would yell at me if I brushed my hair too hard. She'd be like, "You're gonna break all your hair off." And then like, and Tina has this beautiful singing voice. And every Friday before every taping, she would go in her dressing room and she would ask me to come with her, and we'd sit. The dressing rooms are like, they're tiny. They're like 6 feet by maybe 12 feet. And we'd sit there on the little couch and she'd sing. She'd sing just for me before the show. And it was so sweet. So like it was kind of like having like, honestly, I mean, it's ironic that it's called Camp Wilder, but it was sort of like being in summer camp for like a year and then being like, oh my God, the camp burned down. You don't get to go back, So I was sad for sure. For sure. I loved those people.
It seemed like you jumped in those other 2 shows though right after pretty quick. The Hearts of the West and the Home Court, like it was like back to back to back. It seemed like as long as far as dates go.
Yeah. 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 Well, I wanted to keep working for sure. I mean, when you're working back then, you made so much more money being on shows than you do now. Like my sister's a producer and a TV writer, and it's just the way that the SAG pay scale has moved versus then. I mean, you were set. Like if you got a show, like you were making a legitimately a good amount of money, and so all the people who are attached to you are making really good money. So like your agent's like, we're gonna keep you working.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, and my family was, my mom's a nurse, my dad's an actor. We lived in a working class neighborhood. Like we didn't have any money. And so I had started going to a private school because my school district was pretty shitty. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not gonna be able to go back to the school that I've been going to if I don't make any money. So then I was like, well, I got to start working again. So there was an incentive there to continue to pay for my school, which was ironic too, because like then I never went to the school that I was paying for. But yeah, so I jumped into Hearts of the West, which was a weird show too. And it's different. I was 14 turning 15. And then something happens in the business when you're like 15, 16, all of a sudden the skirts get shorter and the shirts get tighter and it's not as it's different what they want from you. So those shows felt a little less those shows, and it's just what they weren't as the character wasn't as cool. Melissa was like kind of a fun, she was like kind of, I don't know, she was kind of tough.
Yeah.
She's
She's definitely
little
the tough one of the
proto-punk.
cast for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She was interesting. Whereas the other ones were just like, okay, here's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who, out of all of the amazing guest stars you had, who's your favorite?
Well, have you gotten to the Jared Leto episode yet?
We haven't.
We know about it.
We
haven't
didn't
watched
want to
it.
assume that he was the favorite. I mean, you had a lot of great
Did you
people.
see her eyes?
I mean, there were a lot of great people for sure. There were so many good actors who came on for sure. But like, I mean, I was 13. I mean,
that's pre-Jordan Catalano. I didn't know that obviously we haven't seen the episodes yet, but I guess he was just always a heartthrob, huh?
Well, I don't know if it was, you guys probably know, but I don't know if it was his first job, his second job. I mean, he was brand new.
Yeah, early.
It was like super early. So, so the way it would work back then is the script is delivered to your house, like a PA brings it at like 10 o'clock at night on a Friday. These poor fucking people. I don't even know. So then you you look at the list of people who've been cast and there's no internet. So you're like, you either know the name or you don't know the name. So, you read the episode and I'm like, ooh, like Hillary's got a love interest and she's a babe. So like, they're going to make him a babe probably. But I didn't know his name. So it's been said before, but I think it bears repeating that being a guest star on a show that's already up and running is really hard. It's like being like a substitute teacher or like going to a new school. Like you're just like thrown into it. So it is a little bit of a spectator sport to come in Monday morning to the studio and sit around the table read and be like, all right, who's coming in? And I don't know the name of the role that he played, but so Jared Leto walks in and he's wearing, it's 1990, whatever, 3, and he's wearing like full like cross colors, like these like heavy denim, like color blocked jeans, like one leg's like primary yellow and the other one's like blue. And he's wearing this like tiny tank top that we all wore that you buy like a 3-pack from JCPenney. And wearing
I thought you were saying that we all traded around Jared Leto's tank top and we all started wearing it.
Just like smell it. No. I mean,
was this for the character? Did he wear this in anticipation of the table read? Did he like this is how I envisioned the character? Who I'm looking on IMDb, Dexter, whatever was his name, but
his name Dexter.
Yeah, is that how he envisioned the character, or was this just how Jared Leto dressed back in '92?
It felt like, I mean, maybe the tank top because he was playing the part of a mechanic.
Okay.
Maybe that was a character choice. I don't know. Maybe it was just like a hip hop loving mechanic. It's possible.
Sure.
But it was like, it was such a look. Oh, but then he was wearing the matching trench coat, the matching denim trench coat on top of it. But despite that, like he was like face meltingly hot. Like we were all just like, what? Like, what? So he walks in and he has this thing that he's always done, because I ended up knowing him later too, but he has this like stare, like he was just like staring, and
then he moves his hair to the side. He like runs his hand through his hair. I've seen that stare from him many times.
Did you watch My So-Called Life?
Yeah, frequently.
Yes. I mean, he was just like, he was already he already understood like how to make that magic happen. Like he was
Mhm.
already had so much presence. I mean, he looked like I don't the outfit. It didn't matter. Like he was just on a different planet. Like he was
Right.
just and always has been. Like he is he is a star. And because I was 13, like he didn't. There was no like. There was never that weirdness of him being like, "Are you going to be one of those people who just fawns all over me?" Because I was like, "I'm 13. This is weird." So we were actually like hung out, and he was actually very cool to me.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, he had so much presence, like you couldn't ignore it. So as like a guest star, as just sort of like experiencing somebody who comes in and clearly has so much ambition, but also understands what it is to be a star. Like it was just an amazing lesson. I was like, whoa, like you get it.
That's so interesting because the way you describe kind of his presence, and we haven't seen the episodes yet, so we don't know the character, but I almost get that Jordan Catalano vibe from that character. And when we saw the homeless episode with AJ Langer, she very much has that Rayanne Graff vibe that she does. And I'm curious, like how, you probably, I don't know, you probably don't know, but I wonder. I mean, I guess that's the kind of thing that casting agents see them on shows like Camp Wilder, and then say, "Hey, these are the people we need to bring in for,
Mm.
auditions for My So-Called Life," because that definitely translates the characters that they were.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that there must have been some narrative going on about like we don't want like a typical sitcom look or a
Mm-hmm.
sitcom actor. Um, because you're right. I mean, they did have something else going on that easily translated to this like totally different genre that my
Yeah.
so-called life ended up being.
Well,
Um, you know,
yeah. I mean, it was a lot of the same character. It was a lot of the same things, just dialed up for that MTV, older teen generation. So.
yeah, yeah. I mean, AJ, I didn't spend a lot of time with AJ because all of her scenes were with Jerry, but
Mhm.
I mean, like, that there's those kid actors who are just like saying what they're supposed to say and kind of play. They're almost like playing the part of the kid actor in real life, and you're just like, that's okay. Like she was one of those people who, she's just super funny and like very much her own person. And I think didn't she go on to do Escape from New York? Isn't that the movie that she ended up doing?
With Kurt
Um,
Russell?
yeah,
I don't remember. I don't know.
they did a remake of it, and I think she was the daughter in it.
Oh, the one Escape from LA. The one you're right.
From
Yes.
LA.
Yeah.
Escape from LA.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, yeah, and that made total sense because I was like, oh yeah, you're playing a homeless kid, you're playing like the one
Mhm.
who's doing ecstasy. Now you're playing somebody in a post-apocalyptic movie. Like
Yeah.
fits,
Makes
fits.
sense. Makes
Since we're
sense.
talking kind of about like doing guest starring, and we already mentioned you going on the episode of Boy Meets World, like what is the goal for an actor when they go and do like a guest starring role on a show? Like, are they trying to be like, hey, I want to show off, and maybe they'll pick me up for multiple episodes, or you kind of just know that you're going in there and coming out, and it's a one and done kind of thing?
Mostly it's a one and done. Maybe in the case of like I think the Urkel character started out as a guest spot, right?
Yep.
And they
Okay.
just yeah. Um, I don't think that happens that often
No.
where like a character just like caught fire and they're like, we've got to just
Is that like the
totally.
dream though? Like you're hoping that that happens, or no?
I think when you're I'm trying to think if that was ever like in the back of my head, like ooh,
If they like
like
me enough, then I could be a
they
regular
like
on Boy Meets World kind of thing.
um I mean, I'm sure on some level you're always kind of, I mean, the truth is like you're always kind of hustling like when
Mm-hmm.
you're acting on a
Sure.
show, always kind of looking to like get people to think that you're the most entertaining or the most compelling. So I'm sure that was there, but I think mostly like guest spots when you talked about them with your agent at the level that I was at, it was like we just want to keep you in the mix. Like
Mhm.
you're not on a show right now. We should just keep you out there, keep you working. And that's what they tell you. But what they are saying is too, like, okay, we get 10% if you work. So,
Right.
and back then it was, I mean, it was way more than you make now, which is
Mhm.
crazy given that it was 30 years ago. But so no, I mean, I think the dream back then was you get a show, the show's successful, but not so successful, and then you translate to film. Like that was the dream trajectory for a
Okay.
child, a la Reese Witherspoon, who
Mhm.
actually didn't start in a show, but Claire Danes,
Right.
that type of trajectory was like what everybody talked about, which is different now. Everybody's like, no, we want to be back on TV.
Be a show. So also on the guest star, and this is not, it's kind of TGIF tangential, but I gotta ask. So you were on an episode of Migos with. Did you get to work with Bronson Pinchot, or were you guys? Did you guys not have any scenes together?
It did,
What was
yeah.
that like? How was that like working with Balky Bartakamis?
Baki Bartakis, yeah. He's an intense dude.
You
Yeah.
know.
We've heard.
Oh, wow. Oh, he's super smart. So, I mean, are you guys watching Reboot? Are you guys watching that show?
I think my wife is. I'm not. No.
Um, so it's about like a sitcom, and they bring everybody back and
Right.
reboot. So Jordan Peele's character is like he's like a Yale trained actor, and then he goes on a sitcom. And so, Bronson was like Yale trained and he's like a classically trained actor.
Mhm.
And you could just tell he was just like, really frustrated. And you're just sort of like, uh, all of us who have no real pretensions about it other than like trying to make money. So I didn't even get it. I didn't even understand why he would be frustrated, because I was like, you got the best dressing room. Like you got but I do remember, and this is so weird. His dressing rooms were usually on either upstairs or on the actual soundstage. And these dressing rooms were on the soundstage. So you'd often pass by people as they went in and out of their dressing room. And so he would open the door to his dressing room, and there was one naked red light bulb, and that's it. And the whole room just was red. It was, I don't know why. I didn't really feel comfortable asking. But I just remember being like, what? I don't know. I don't know.
That all makes sense.
So yeah, is that consistent with stories you guys have heard
It's
about?
it's not surprising.
Yeah,
So yeah.
but he was never. I mean, that's there. Nothing to besmirch.
No, and I don't. We're not looking for bad stories. I was hoping. I mean, I like fun stories. I'm a much bigger fan of fun stories than besmirch stories. So
Yeah, yeah. That was just like, I'm still so curious. I'm like, do you have like a retinal issue? Like, what's happening? Like, why are your eyes like why do you need a red light? But yeah, but he was also very kind and wanted to make it the best he could. I mean, I remember doing the scene with him like over and over again, like
yeah,
getting it better, type of a work ethic.
very
So
cool.
yeah.
How old were you, or where were you in your life when you decided that you were kind of done with it, that you didn't want to act anymore?
Um, I was 21. And I graduated college, and I spent all the money I ever made on going to college, which I don't recommend really.
I'm still paying it back.
As I said, most people spend all the money they never make going to college. So at least
That's true.
yeah.
That's true. That's a good check. I had the privilege of not graduating without debt. And I was like, well, I have no money now. So I went back to LA and I started acting again. And I just, uh, there's a really interesting thing about being a 20-year-old, 21-year-old actor versus like a kid actor who's beholden to like parents who take you around. Like the pool is so much smaller of people that you're competing with
Mhm.
for parts. And at that point, I would go into an audition room, and it was like all these people who had come from all over the country to make it. And they were so much more committed than I was at that point. I was just like, I was burned out. I was like, I'm done. Um, and it was great to be like, you know what, this isn't for me anymore. And I just get to like cheer other people on, like my sister who's like super successful and great in the industry, and yeah, and go off and do other things. But my agents, they were bummed. But then they move on, they find somebody else, and it's like, yeah, it was time. So Um, I'm trying to think if there was ever a moment when I was like, there was something that, yeah, I never got to do this. I was like, but no, like there was nothing really left to do that I really wanted to do anymore. So I got to go. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good while it lasted.
Are you
Yeah.
still friends with the? It seems at this point, me asking you if you'd ever be up for like a reunion type situation is just silly because it seems like you loved everybody you worked with. But are you still friends with any of the cast members?
Sadly, no. No, I mean, it happens where you really do have these intense relationships and then they just go away.
Sure.
It's like a reset button. And then the more you do it, the more you just kind of cycle through these like really intense and they're very real. Like you spend all this time with people, but rarely does it end up being something that you're like, you make the time and the effort to be friends with them. Mm-hmm. I'll run into them now and then around town. And that's the other weird thing is because like I was a kid, so like I look different. So it's hard for them. I'll be like, hey, be like, oh yeah. I'm like, I know you look the same, but I'm like an adult now. So that's kind of weird. But like I'm trying to think of anybody that you guys would know of that I did a movie of the week, and my best friend in the entire world is still from that movie of the week. And like my sister will work with people, like she wrote some episode of a show that Melissa Joan Hart directed, and Melissa and I had worked on a movie of the week together, and I got to see her, and I was like, hey, what's up?
Another TGIF alum.
Another TGIF alum. That's right. Yeah.
You don't have to get too personal into things if you don't want to, but what are you up to now? Like anything we should know about or that we should care about?
Or that you want to promote? Yeah.
I don't know if you should care about it. I mean, I care about it, but thank you for asking. That's super cool. I'm a writer now. So I have lots of, I have essays that are out there, but I have a novel, an excerpt is coming out soon in a literary journal that's being published. So I'm like, I'm really grateful. Like I worked for a long time. I taught kindergarten, first and second grade. And then I did a bunch of other stuff. I worked with my mom. She, opened a resource center for parents. And so I like taught people how to use electric breast pumps and like taught sling class, like did all this like really, really granular stuff about parenting. And now I'm at a point where I'm able to just write professionally. So that's what I do.
Awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah. That's what I spend my time doing.
So is it going to be, the book is going to be out like in stores, Amazon, all that good stuff?
It doesn't have a publisher yet.
Gotcha.
But the excerpt that's coming out is in a literary journal called Lit Angels. And cool. You can find that she's another kind of like 90s icon, actually. Her name's Francesca Leah Block. She wrote a series of books called the Weetsy Bat series. Okay. Do you guys know those? But it's actually getting made into a Peacock show very soon. Oh. But her journal, she edits and curates it. And so it's coming out not in January. And then you can find most of my writing at my handle on Instagram, which is just Mother Sucked. And let's see, I'm trying to think where else. That's really, that's it for now. So when the book comes out.
That's a lot. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Meghann, thank you so much for coming on. We really do appreciate it. It's been fun learning about different things about Camp Wilder and things that we can look forward to in the upcoming episodes. And hopefully more people, I mean, it's kind of hard to find right now, but we'll go back and watch it 30 years later with us.
Yeah, that would be, I hope so too. But really, you guys, thanks so much. I really appreciate you reaching out and doing it. It's super cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I really enjoy your commentary. It's super fun. So
that's good to know. It's good to know. Thank you.
When we rank the episodes at the end, if Camp Wilder's always like number 4, it has nothing to do with your character, I promise.
Oh, I've noticed it's always number 4.
It's not always number 4, I promise.
If you think it's always number 4, you haven't caught up yet, because in the first couple episodes, you probably heard it. In the first couple episodes, I'm like, I really hope they start dealing more with the kids. Because like what Steve mentioned earlier, it's like, I don't want this to be a Mary Page Keller show. We just did that for 2 seasons. I want this to be about the kids, about kid problems. And that's when that's when it moves up in the rankings significantly. So
Okay. All right. Then
keep listening. Keep listening.
okay. I'll tune back in. I'm excited. I'm excited to
Awesome.
hear
Thank you,
Shine.
Meghann. Appreciate it so much.